Tony watched her closely, jaw tightening. They came to us too, she continued. Men in suits. Smiling, polite. Said they represented investors who wanted to modernize the block. They offered us money, half what the property was worth. My dad said no. A month later, he was gone. Gone. Tony repeated. Heart attack, she whispered. Stress. He was only 55. She wiped her eyes, forcing herself to keep going. After he passed, I took over with Marcus. We made it work for a while. But then the threats started. Graffiti on the walls. Windows smashed. Dead rats on the doorstep. They wanted us scared. Her voice cracked. We filed reports. Called the police. They said it was kids. Told us not to make a big deal of it. Tony's hand curled into a fist on the desk, knuckles whitening. 3 weeks ago, Amber said, I was at home. Marcus went to the restaurant after hours to do inventory. Around 2 a.m., I got a call. The restaurant was on fire. She paused, her face twisting with memory. By the time I got there, the building was gone. Just smoke and flames. They said Marcus was lucky to be alive. 3rd-degree burns. He was in there when someone threw the Molotov through the back door. Tony's eyes were cold, but his voice was gentle. And the fire marshal ruled it accidental. Yeah. She laughed bitterly. Said maybe faulty wiring. I showed them security footage, the cameras had been smashed before the fire. You think that mattered? They shrugged it off. Tony's jaw flexed. And the police? They said there was no evidence. Her tone dripped with anger now, years of frustration boiling to the surface. No evidence. You know what that means? It means they didn't want to find any. Tony sat back slowly. What about Richard Ashford? The name froze her. How do you? I do my homework, Tony said simply. You called him out publicly. At a community meeting 2 weeks ago. Told him he was targeting black-owned businesses under the banner of urban renewal. I saw the footage. Amber looked down, guilt and fear flickering across her face. I shouldn't have said anything. I was angry. He was standing there, smiling, talking about cleaning up the neighborhood. I couldn't stay quiet. She shook her head. I told him he was the reason my father was dead. That his projects were pushing families out, ruining lives. He didn't even flinch. Just smiled that fake politician smile and said, change always has casualties, Ms. Robin. Tony's expression didn't change, but something darkened behind his eyes. That night, she said softly, I was walking home from the subway. 2 men followed me. I thought maybe I was imagining it, so I crossed the street. They crossed too. Her breath hitched, hands trembling as she spoke. When I turned onto my block, they grabbed me. One held me down, another covered my mouth. And the third, she stopped, voice breaking. Tony leaned forward, voice low but steady. Say it, Amber. The third one lit a cigarette, she whispered. He pressed it into my arm. Over and over. They laughed while they did it. Said, this is what happens when you people don't know your place. Councilman Ashford says hello. The words hung in the air like smoke. Tony didn't speak. He couldn't, not without his anger boiling over. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to keep his composure. They left me there on the sidewalk, Amber said. When I finally got home, I scrubbed my arm until it bled. I didn't want my mama to see. I told her it was a kitchen burn. Tony's voice was quiet. You reported it. Of course I did, Amber said bitterly. The next morning, I went straight to the precinct. Gave them the details, the names, even the direction they ran. The detective smiled like I was wasting his time. Said without witnesses, there was nothing he could do. She laughed harshly, wiping tears. A week later, I checked the report. It was marked unfounded. Every one of them is. 3 reports, all gone. The same captain signs off on them each time, Thomas Brennan. Tony exchanged a glance with Vincent in his mind's eye. Brennan. Ashford's college buddy. Of course. They didn't even pretend to care, Amber continued. Said I was making trouble. That I should focus on my brother, not stir things up. And your insurance? She gave a humorless smile. Cancelled the day after the fire. Said their investigation found unsafe practices in the kitchen. The restaurant was spotless. My father used to joke he could eat off the floors. But it didn't matter. They had their excuse. Tony's gaze hardened. So you've been paying for everything yourself? Amber nodded. Marcus's hospital bills are over $200,000. We lost everything. So yeah, I took every job I could find. The diner, the cleaning company, and, here. She looked at him, eyes weary but defiant. I wasn't looking for pity. I just needed work that paid on time. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the city outside. Tony stood and walked to the window, his reflection cutting across the glass like a shadow. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost dangerous. Amber, look at me. She did. I'm going to handle this, he said. Richard Ashford, the men who attacked you, the captain who buried your reports, every last one of them. They're going to answer for what they did to you and your family. Her eyes widened. You don't understand. He's a city councilman. He has connections everywhere. The police, the press, even the feds. You can't touch him. Tony turned back to her, a faint, cold smile curving at the corner of his mouth. That's where you're wrong. There was something in his tone, an assurance that came not from arrogance, but certainty. The kind that only a man with power could carry. I've spent my life dealing with men like Ashford, Tony said quietly. They think the law makes them untouchable. But I don't use the law. I use truth. And truth has a way of bleeding through every wall they build. Amber's breath caught. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Tony's gaze softened just slightly. You work in my home. That makes you mine to protect. I don't let monsters roam free in my city. She shook her head. You'll get yourself killed. Tony chuckled softly. It wouldn't be the first time someone tried. He crossed the room, opening the drawer of his desk. From it, he pulled out a sleek black phone, one of his private lines, untraceable. He handed it to her. If anyone approaches you, he said, threatens you, even looks at you wrong, you call me immediately. Day or night. Understand? Amber stared at the phone like it was a weapon she didn't know how to use. Mr. Gunner, I can't. You can, he interrupted, his tone soft but final. You're not alone anymore. Her eyes shimmered with fresh tears. She nodded. Yes, sir. Tony's expression stayed still, but his voice dropped low. Good. Because starting today, no one lays a hand on you again. Not in my city. Amber swallowed hard. What are you going to do? Tony glanced at the window, the endless sprawl of New York glinting below. Find the man who started this fire, he said. And make sure he burns for real. As Amber left his office, clutching the phone like a lifeline, Tony returned to his desk. The city stretched before him, a web of power, politics, and corruption. Somewhere within it, Richard Ashford thought he was untouchable. But Tony Gunner had just decided otherwise. The morning after Amber's confession, Tony's penthouse no longer felt like a home, it felt like a command post. The walls hummed with quiet purpose, phones vibrating, laptops open, voices low and focused. Tony stood at the center of it all, a man forged in calm fury. He'd dealt with predators before, business sharks, crooked bankers, corrupt politicians. But this was different. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about power, the kind that thrived on silence and fear. Not this time. Everyone in, Tony said. Within minutes, the conference room filled. Vincent Corso entered first, coffee in one hand, his ever-present skepticism in the other. Marco De Luca followed, eyes sharp, posture rigid, already scanning the room like he was preparing for a hit. Then came Sofia Reyes, his youngest recruit, a digital forensics prodigy who looked too soft-spoken for her role until you watched her dismantle an encrypted firewall in 30 seconds. Last was James Wu, the quiet accountant who spoke in numbers instead of sentences. He was Tony's ghost in the system. When money moved, James saw it before anyone else did. Tony looked around the table, his voice measured but commanding. You all know why we're here. Councilman Richard Ashford. He ordered the fire that nearly killed Marcus Robin, and his men tortured Amber for speaking up. We're going to expose him, completely. Vincent leaned back in his chair. You're sure about that, Tony? We're not talking about some street-level thug. This guy's fourth-generation politics. His father and grandfather both sat in that same city council seat. He's protected. Tony's gaze was cold. So am I. Marco slid a folder across the table. This is what we have so far. Richard Ashford, District 14 Councilman. Represents Bed-Stuy, Crown Heights, part of Bushwick. Publicly, he's all about community values, family, church, affordable housing. Behind the scenes. He opened the folder. Photos, headlines, and property records spread across the table like a map of rot. Real estate holdings through shell companies worth roughly $47 million, Marco continued. That's what we can see. There's more buried deeper. James Wu's calm voice joined in. I started with property records from 2021 onward. Over the last 3 years, 23 black-owned businesses in Bed-Stuy have been forced to close, fires, vandalism, sudden inspections, denied permits. Within weeks of each closure, the properties were sold for 40 to 60% below market value. He tapped a spreadsheet projected on the screen. All the purchases go through 3 holding companies, Greenleaf Development, Silverstone Urban Renewal, and Marlowe Partners LLC. Each one, in turn, traces back to the Ashford Family Trust. Vincent whistled softly. 12 million profit, easy. James nodded. 12.4, to be exact. Sophia looked up from her laptop. That's just from the physical assets. If you count the campaign donations tied to these same entities, the number doubles. Tony studied the data quietly, then said, so he's not just laundering money, he's laundering legitimacy. Turning corruption into philanthropy. Sophia gave a small smile. Exactly. He plays the saint in public, hides behind shell companies, and uses the system to clean his mess. Tony turned to her. How close can you get to him? Sophia adjusted her glasses, her fingers already flying across the keyboard. I've been mapping his digital footprint. The man's cautious, encrypted devices, burner phones, multiple VPNs, but nobody's perfect. She brought up a screen filled with web traffic data. He's got encrypted message threads through an off-the-record server registered in Panama. Also, periodic crypto transfers, small amounts, but regular, to the same 6 wallets. My guess? Payments to his crew. Can we trace them? Tony asked. I'm already on it, she said. Give me a few hours and I'll have the names behind those wallets. But there's something else. She enlarged a map on the monitor. This is Bed-Stuy. Look at the fire incidents over the last 3 years. 13 of them match properties connected to those same shell companies. Marco leaned forward. That's not coincidence. That's control. Exactly, Sophia said. He creates chaos, then buys the ashes. Marco opened another file. Street-level intel backs that up. I talked to my contacts in the precinct. There's a small network, police, fire inspectors, city code officers, all taking orders from someone higher up. They target specific families, mostly black-owned businesses refusing to sell. The pattern's identical: graffiti first, then random inspections, then vandalism, then fire. Always unfounded, always accidental. Tony's eyes narrowed. Names. Marco flipped the folder open. NYPD Captain Thomas Brennan. Bed Stewie's precinct commander. Ashford's frat brother from Cornell. Every report Amber filed went through his desk. Tony let out a slow, deliberate breath. Of course it did. Vincent exhaled sharply. This is deeper than a councilman. You're talking about an entire ring of public servants, police, fire, city code, all on the take. Tony looked at him. Then we burn the ring. Vincent frowned. Tony. He leaned forward, voice low. You're stepping into a political minefield. The second Ashford smells pressure, he'll go public. You think the media's going to take your side? You're a private businessman with a questionable reputation. He's a councilman with photo ops at church picnics. You can't win that fight in daylight. Tony met his gaze evenly. Then we don't fight in daylight. Vincent shook his head. This could bring attention we don't need. Feds, City Hall, the press. Tony's voice cut through like steel. He burned a man alive in his own restaurant. He tortured a woman for speaking up. I don't care if he eats breakfast with the mayor. He's done. The room went still. Vincent exhaled, defeated but loyal. Then we'll do it your way. Quiet. Fast. James Wu projected another image on the wall, a web of lines connecting Ashford to various donors, developers, and contractors. This is the Ashford network. You've got construction companies that never existed before 2020, banks with offshore accounts, and inspectors signing off on permits they never reviewed. Each layer is built to obscure the one above it. He zoomed in on a red highlighted name. Look at this, Fire Marshal Edward Collins. He signed off on the accidental fire report for Robin's Soul Food. Guess what else he did? Cleared 7 other fires tied to properties Ashford later bought. Sophia frowned. How has no one caught this? James gave a bitter smile. Because they're not looking. Tony's expression was grim. They will be. Soon. Marco stood, pulling up a city map. We're already running eyes on Ashford. 2 men on rotation at City Hall, 1 tail on his car. He spends 3 nights a week at a restaurant on 56th, La Riviera. Same booth, same people. I can plant a mic there within 24 hours. Tony nodded. Do it. I want ears in his office, his car, his favorite restaurant. Cameras outside his home. Everything legal we can't do, I'll take responsibility for. Vincent muttered, You're setting up a surveillance grid on a city councilman. You realize how insane that sounds? Tony smirked. You call it insane. I call it insurance. Sophia looked up. If Marco gets me live audio, I can cross-reference it with Ashford's communications. His encrypted network uses predictable key cycles. If he slips, even once, I can trace the entire chain. Tony's tone sharpened. Then make him slip. Hours passed. The war room thrummed with movement, typing, phone calls, strategy murmurs. Tony paced behind them, scanning screens as connections began forming in real time. Property seizures, ghost LLCs, police cover-ups. It was all there, a system designed to suffocate an entire community while lining one man's pockets. This isn't redevelopment, James said quietly. It's ethnic cleansing by paperwork. Tony stopped pacing. His jaw tightened. Not anymore. Vincent looked at him. You realize what happens when you take this public? Ashford goes down, sure, but so do half the people tied to him. Judges, captains, donors. You'll be tearing out the city's roots. Tony's eyes were like stone. Then it's about time someone did. By evening, Marco returned from the field. Bugs are live, he said, setting a small receiver on the table. Static hissed for a moment, then resolved into faint background noise, silverware clinking, a man's laughter. That's La Riviera, Marco said. Ashford's having dinner right now with Brennan. The audio crackled. Ashford's voice, you handled that Robin woman yet? Brennan, she's quiet. Still working somewhere uptown, but she won't talk again. Trust me. Ashford, good. I don't need another headline about community outrage. The next acquisition's 2 blocks down, same procedure. Inspection, citation, then offer to buy. If they refuse, we make it unlivable. Tony's jaw flexed. Sophia muted the feed, her face pale. That's enough to bury him already. Not yet, Tony said quietly. We do this right. I want every piece. Every name. Every dollar. The night stretched on. Screens glowed. Coffee cooled. Outside, the city moved unaware. Then, around midnight, Sophia straightened suddenly. Got it, she whispered. Tony turned. What? I'm in. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, opening file after file. I cracked his encrypted server. He's been running his own internal communication hub, emails, memos, transaction logs. He thought the offshore routing would protect him, but he mirrored backups to a private NAS in his home office. Amateur mistake. Lines of code scrolled down her screen. Her expression changed, first triumph, then disbelief. Boss, she said softly. You need to see this. Tony moved beside her. On screen were lists of names, judges, police captains, real estate developers, council aides. Payments. Contract memos. Blackmail files. Even digital copies of signed inspection waivers. It's bigger than we thought, Sophia whispered. Ashford's not the head. He's just a node. There's an entire network behind him, a development syndicate using city power to seize neighborhoods across all 5 boroughs. Tony's expression darkened like a storm front. How big? Sophia swallowed. Big enough that if we go after him, the city itself might fight back. Tony stared at the screen in silence for a long moment. Then he said, calm and final, then we don't just go after him. He turned toward the window, the city glowing like a grid of secrets waiting to burn. We go after all of them. As the team exchanged tense glances, the truth hung heavy in the air. The war Tony was stepping into wasn't about one man, it was about a machine. And he had just decided to tear it apart, piece by piece. The storm broke just after midnight. Outside Tony Gunner's penthouse, thunder rolled across the city like a warning, but inside, the real lightning was coming from Sophia's laptop screen. She hadn't spoken for nearly 5 minutes, just stared, typing furiously, eyes wide behind the glow of her monitors. Her usual calm was gone, replaced by disbelief and something close to fear. Talk to me, Tony said, his tone quiet but heavy. Sophia exhaled shakily. Boss, it's not just Ashford anymore. What I found, it's national. Vincent, standing behind her, frowned. Define national. Sophia turned the screen toward them. 5 states. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Massachusetts. The same network, identical codes, same digital infrastructure, even the same payment cycles. This isn't a single man's corruption. It's an organization. She zoomed in on a data map. Thousands of dots connected by thin red lines formed an ugly spiderweb spreading across the northeast. Marco swore under his breath. How many people are we talking about? Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper. 217 confirmed members. Law enforcement. City council members. Developers. Inspectors. Business owners. Even a few journalists. Tony's jaw tightened. And they all answer to Ashford. Not directly, Sophia said. He's a coordinator, a mid-level hub. But every major operation in New York routes through him. He runs the funding, selects the targets, controls the messaging. Think of him as the franchise owner of hate. Sophia began scrolling through files, emails, encrypted chats, and financial records. Each folder opened a new level of rot. They use code names, she continued. Ashford is Revelation. Brennan, the precinct captain, is Shield. There's one they refer to as Preacher. I haven't identified him yet, but his messages suggest he's the ideological head. He writes like a manifesto. Tony's eyes narrowed. What kind of manifesto? Sophia hesitated. It's about restoring the American neighborhood, protecting heritage, cleansing urban decay. They frame it like patriotism, but it's racism dressed in rhetoric. Their operations are planned like military missions. She clicked open another file labeled Target Database. A spreadsheet filled the screen, photos, home addresses, business names, even estimated property values. They track victims like assets, Sophia said, voice tight. 127 families, 47 destroyed businesses. Estimated total damages, $31.4 million. Vincent ran a hand through his hair. Christ almighty. Tony leaned forward. Show me the Robins. Sophia searched the database and froze. Here. On screen, target ID 039, Robin family, Bedford-Stuyvesant. Next to it, notes in cold, bureaucratic precision. Pressure applied through economic hardship. Public humiliation unsuccessful. Fire operation successful. Collateral injury, Marcus Robin, acceptable. Surveillance ongoing. Tony's hand clenched into a fist. The knuckles went white. Acceptable, he repeated quietly. Nobody spoke. Marco stepped in. We got more, boss. The bugs are paying off. He pulled out a small flash drive and inserted it into Sophia's laptop. Ashford met Brennan again at La Riviera. You'll want to hear this. The speakers crackled to life. Ashford, laughing, that woman at the community meeting learned her lesson. Maybe her brother's burns weren't enough, but at least she shut her mouth. Brennan, people are getting jumpy about the fires. You might want to slow down. Ashford, no, we double down. Harlem's next. Then Washington Heights. You let me handle the PR. We'll frame it as a housing initiative, make it look like revitalization. Nobody questions progress. Brennan, and if someone does? Ashford, then we remind them accidents happen. You know the drill. The laughter that followed was the kind that made blood run cold. Vincent's jaw tightened. That's enough to bury him for life. Tony shook his head. Not life. Legacy. He stared at the laptop screen, his reflection hovering over the data like a ghost. We're not just going to take him down. We're going to make the world watch him fall. James Wu, who had been silent until now, spoke softly. This crosses state lines. With 200 active members and coordinated crimes in multiple jurisdictions, this isn't corruption, it's domestic terrorism. Sophia nodded. And organized at a scale the FBI can't ignore if it's made public. Vincent frowned. Then why not tip them off anonymously? Drop the files, walk away clean. Tony turned to him, expression unreadable. Anonymous tips get buried, Vincent. They disappear into filing cabinets labeled pending review. You know how this city works, power protects power. He picked up one of the printed files and tossed it onto the table. No. This doesn't get buried. We make it undeniable, so public, so loud, the feds won't have a choice but to act. We force their hand. Vincent met his gaze, the loyalty and fear mixing behind his eyes. You're playing with dynamite, Tony. Tony smirked faintly. Good thing I know how to handle explosions. The war room turned into a think tank of controlled chaos. Screens flickered, maps updated, connections formed between names and money trails. Tony paced slowly, his mind already several moves ahead. We need a stage. A moment they can't script their way out of. Something public, something permanent. Sophia tilted her head. Ashford has a closed-door council session scheduled next week. Topic: urban renewal and economic growth. He'll be surrounded by allies. No press allowed. Tony's eyes lit with dark satisfaction. Then that's where it happens. Vincent raised a brow. You're thinking of exposing him inside his own chamber. Tony nodded. Broadcast it live. Every word, every slur, every confession. He'll dig his own grave on camera. Sophia hesitated. I can do it. Hijack the chamber feed, reroute it to the major networks, maybe even push it to social media in real time. But it's risky, if anyone traces it back. They won't, Tony said. You'll make it look like a glitch. Vincent sighed. You're really going through with this. Tony turned to him, voice calm but absolute. They hurt my people. They burned a man alive. You think I'm stopping now? That night, Tony left the penthouse for the first time in days. No entourage, no guards, just him and Marco driving through the rain to Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. The hall smelled like bleach and quiet suffering. He found Marcus Robin in a dimly lit room on the 4th floor, surrounded by machines and the slow, steady beep of survival. Marcus's arms were wrapped in gauze, his face scarred, his eyes dull but awake. When Tony stepped in, Marcus tried to sit up, wincing in pain. Don't, Tony said softly. You're fine where you are. Marcus studied him, unsure. You're my sister's boss. Tony nodded. She told me about the fire. Marcus gave a weak laugh. Yeah. That's one word for it. He looked away, jaw tight. They took everything. The restaurant, our savings, our future. My mom cries every night. Amber's killing herself working 3 jobs, and no one, cares. He paused, voice breaking. We built that place from nothing, you know. My dad used to say, we don't just feed people, we remind them they belong here. Now it's all ash. And those bastards, they're probably having dinner right now. Tony said nothing for a long moment. He just stood there, watching the young man's trembling hands, the faint smell of burned skin still clinging to the air. Finally, Tony spoke. You're wrong about one thing. Marcus frowned. What? Tony leaned closer, his tone low but certain. Somebody cares. Marcus's eyes flicked up. Tony continued, and they're going to pay for what they did to you. Every last one of them. Marcus blinked back tears, trying to believe him. You don't know how powerful they are. Tony straightened. I don't need to. They don't know how powerful I am. He left a thick envelope on the bedside table. Your bills are handled. Don't argue. As he turned to leave, Marcus whispered, Why are you doing this? Tony paused in the doorway. Because I protect what's mine. And then he was gone. Back at the penthouse, the team was still at work when Tony returned. Sophia looked up, eyes red from exhaustion but alive with purpose. I finished mapping the network hierarchy, she said. You were right, it's a machine. Ashford's just one cog. But if we pull him out, the whole thing shakes. Good, Tony said. Let's make it shake. James added quietly, once we release this, it'll go beyond Ashford. Federal probes, indictments, headlines. It'll drag half the East Coast into the fire. Tony looked out the window, the city glimmering like wet steel. Then maybe it's time it burned. Vincent stepped closer. Tony, if we do this, there's no going back. These people play dirty. They'll come after you, politically, financially, maybe worse. Tony gave a faint, humorless smile. Let them. I'm not the one who should be afraid. It was nearly dawn when Tony made the call. The others had gone home or passed out where they sat. The city outside was washed clean by the storm. He dialed a number from memory, a line that hadn't been used in years. After 3 rings, a voice answered, groggy but alert. Michael Chen. Tony smiled faintly. It's been a long time, counselor. There was a pause. Then, wary recognition. Tony Gunner. I haven't heard that name in years. You saved my daughter once. I'm calling in that favor, Tony said. What's this about? Tony's tone hardened. Domestic terrorism. Hate crimes. Corruption that goes beyond city lines. I have evidence, names, transactions, recordings. It's going to blow wide open. Michael's breath caught. You're telling me you've got something federal? Oh, it's federal all right, Tony said. And when I hand it over, I need to know you'll handle it clean. No leaks. No politics. Just justice. A long silence stretched on the line. Then Michael said, quietly but firmly, you can trust me. Tony's eyes narrowed as the first light of morning spilled across the skyline. Good, he said. Because if this goes the way I think it will, the entire country's about to wake up. The storm outside had passed, but inside Tony Gunner's world, the thunder was only beginning. He had pulled back the curtain, and what he saw wasn't just corruption. It was a cancer eating the nation alive. And he had just decided to be its cure.